Presentation of our lectures about the most recent results of researches from the Ebla excavations and studies. I'm very glad to be here at the University of Ankara, and also I have to take my greetings for all of you, and especially the greetings of the head of my department. And as you, Professor Kulapolo, already told you, our lectures is divided in two parts. After a very short introduction about Ebla, Dr. Agnese Vacca will talk about the early Bronze Age, the sites, and then I will focus on the Middle Bronze Age, and especially on the domestic areas and working places at Ebla. So the site of Ebla, whose modern name is Telmarvik, is located, as you see in the geographical map, at the midway between the Euphrates Valley and the Mediterranean coast, around 55 kilometers south of Aleppo. And this location is very important for the growing of the ancient urban town, because it's in the crossing, the middle of the crossing, commercial routes connecting Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean coast, but also in the main routes connecting the northern Anatolian plateau with the southern Levant. So this is very important, taking into account also the materials that was exchanged during the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC, and as we will see, talking about especially the royal palace of Ebla. So the excavations at Ebla started in 1964, headed by Professor Paolo Mattie, that you can see in the picture on the right of the slides. And it was a very important and long-term project of excavation, because Professor Mattie and his team, I will join Professor Mattie for my first excavation there, where I was student at Sapienza University of Rome in 1991. Then every year there is excavation season up to until the 2010, when, as you know, every foreign expedition was interrupted by the Syrian crisis and war. But as we will see, we continue the studies on the Ebla materials, and we have new projects for publication and investigation of the site. The sequence, a very general sequence of the occupation at Ebla is in the slides on the right, and you can see that we have the first urban growth during the early Bronze Age, especially the early Bronze III. And then we have the apogee of the power of Ebla, the time of the royal palace and the state archives found inside the palace, during the early Bronze 4A. That means the period between the 25th century, 23rd century BC. And then Ebla was destroyed at the end of this period, probably by Sargon, the first king of the Akkad dynasty, but there is also other theories. Some other scholars think that Ebla was destroyed 10 years ago by Mari. Anyway, Ebla, the first Ebla was destroyed by an army. Then there is another phase that we call early Bronze 4B in general chronological periodization of Syria, that lasted 3 centuries, and again Ebla was destroyed. We don't know who is the responsible of this destruction. One possibility was one king of the 3rd dynasty of Ur. After this destruction started the Middle Bronze period of the Amorite period, and we divided this period that lasted more or less 4 centuries in two main phases, Middle Bronze I and Middle Bronze II, each subdivided into other periods. And he started at the beginning of the 2nd millennium BC and ended probably at the end of the 17th century BC, again with a fierce destruction, and after this Ebla became a very small settlement and village, and this destruction probably was carried out by an army coming from the north, from Anatolia, probably the Hittite king Mursili I. And in the analysis and study of the epos of Freilassung that was found at Bogatskei, we know some information about this destruction, and it's probably the Hittite army was allied with some Hurrian kingdoms, because in this text was mentioned a king Pisikara that is an Hurrian king. So this is the main phases of the life of the settlements, and of course to have 3 destructions is very important, because each destruction sealed the archaeological levels of the last phase before the destruction. And so we found in the buildings material sealed on the floors, sealed by the destruction, and so very precisely dated. And this is very important because can have a secure stratigraphy and chronological synchronization by C14 datings and historical events. So this is very important for the reconstruction of the history of the town, and more in general for the reconstruction of the history of the region. Here you can see that we have very different data from each phases. The early Bronze Age 4A, so the period of the Royal Palace G, we have found the state archives, and so we have a huge amount of information, textual information from the palace, with the central state archives of the kingdom. We calculate about 5,000 tablets and more than 16,000 of tablets and fragments, so a very large amount, taking into account that this was dated to the 24th century BC. But we don't have a large amount of information about architecture and urban layout of this phase. We have excavated part of the royal palace, 2 temples, the Temple of the Rock and the Red Temple, and one multifunctional building, building P5, that is a public building. So, for example, we have really no information about domestic architecture of this important period. Then the EB4B, we have no textual information, direct information with the discoveries of cuneiform tablets. And also we have scant information about the buildings of the town. But in the following Middle Bronze period, we have large amounts of information from the urban layout with different kinds of buildings, and we will see in my lecture. But contrary of the early Bronze Age 4A, we have found really a dozen of cuneiform tablets dating from the Middle Bronze Age. So thinking about, for example, Kultepe, that it's more or less the same period. We have 12 tablets at Ebla, and you know how many thousands of tablets we have found at Kultepe. So you can see that there are different sets of data, and so the global and comprehensive reconstruction of the history of the town, we have to take into account these differences. Only few words, and also you can see here the difference in the architecture of the early Bronze Age period. So you can see that here we have found the temples, one temple here, another temple here, and here the royal palace. But this is only without any information. So all the lower town we have really completely unknown for the early Bronze Age 4 period. On the right side, you see the buildings of the Middle Bronze Age, and you can see that there is more information and large exposures of excavated area. I would like only to conclude the introduction to see what we are doing after the interruption of the excavations at the site in 2010. 2010 was the last fieldwork campaigns, and it was at the beginning of an European project funded by the European Council, and this Ebla project was devoted to the investigation of the territory of Ebla and to understand the formation of the Ebla power during the 3rd millennium BC. But unfortunately, it was not possible to work on the field, but at the meantime, we worked a lot on information that was gathered in the past and also was possible to acquire through, for example, remote sensing studies. And we can see here a picture with satellite, different levels of different kind of imagery that was acquired during the project. And we worked to reconstruct the settlement pattern of the Ebla region between the Western Mountain and the steppe region, the arid margins, to the east, immediately before the Jabul Plain. So you can see the position of Tel Mardik Ebla and Tel Tukan, another very important 30 hectares large site in the area of Ebla, in a very fertile region of the Matk. There was an ancient lake. And so you can see the distribution of the site, and we are working for the publication of these results of the settlement dynamics from the Old Bronze Age up to the Iron Age. And in this project, it was also headed by Agnese Vacca, thanks to the grant of the Harvard University, and this project will end next year with the publication of a volume, Ebla Landscape Studies, Trends in Settlement Patterns from the Early Bronze to the Iron Age. And just 1 month ago, we obtained another funded project by our Ministry of University. It was headed by myself together with Agnese Vacca, and the title of this project is not yet started. I don't still have received the money for the project, but we have one, so we are sure that for 3 years we can work on this project. And the project is entitled Big Data and Early Archives. The project will last from 2019 until 2021, measuring settlement dynamics and environmental exploitation in the Ebla region during the 3rd millennium BC. We would like to work on the quantitative aspects of the urban kingdom of Ebla, putting together data coming from the cuneiform tablets that mention how many villages, how is the production of agriculture and husbandry, how many smiths, how many craftsmen's activity was performed in the palace, together with data coming from the archaeological excavation. So comparing these two different data sets, we hope that we acquire new information about the development of the site during the early Bronze Age. So I can now continue with the lecture of Agnese Vacca.